in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important, right? Because if you fail at a company, it feels like the end of the world, but just get up and do your next thing, right? It's not that hard to find the next thing. It's much like, it is hard. Like, don't get me wrong, founding a company, having a good idea is friggin' hard, but it's still easier than like repairing your broken soul.
This episode is brought to you by WHU, the Otto Beisheim School of Management. WHU is reshaping the way students learn about business, management, finance, and entrepreneurship through its innovative programs and partnerships in Germany and across the globe. To learn more about this globally ranked university, visit whu.edu today.
Hey folks, Gerrit here. In this latest episode of the Most Awesome Founder podcast, we welcome Daniel Hanemann. Entrepreneur, investor, comedian, polyglot, and currently founder CEO of Wundertax. He also happens to be a WHU alum. Today we're going to be discussing Daniel's founder journey, what it's like being an entrepreneur in multiple countries, how life outside of work informs life inside of it, and so much more.
Coming to you from WHU on the banks of the Rhine River in beautiful Fallendar, Germany. This is the best and most awesome founder podcast. A show about entrepreneurs, innovators, advisors, and educators, and the stories that make them who they are today.
Daniel, welcome to our humble, yet not so humbly named podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Dude, it's always great to grab an alum that's doing cool things and get them to tell a little bit of their story back to the next generation of aspiring founders at WHU. It's funny, it seems like it comes in waves. When I talk about the alums at WHU, I kind of talk about these generations. Yeah. And I think you were in a pretty strong generation of graduates, right? Like, you had a lot of founders coming out of that time.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I like a lot of my peers are founded pretty successful startups. I'd say.
Yeah, I think it seems to me that there is another generation. A couple of years ago, I started the accelerator at WHU, and way more applicants than we were able to take. This past year, my replacement, Max Eckel, is running it now, and the ecosystem seems to be
flourishing.
Yeah.
No, I think our accelerator of our generation was Rocket Internet, especially Delivery Hero, the whole Food Panda thing, and all these. We call them the delivery wars, but also the whole Movinga story. All these hypergrowth startups that came in our generation, like plus minus 2 years. I'd say, yeah.
Well, that's a good segue into how we start all of our episodes, which is a little bit of storytelling. So why don't you kick things off by kind of telling us a little bit about your journey, your founder journey, kind of where you come from and how you ended up in the seat you're in today?
Yeah, absolutely. So going way back, I think... I was born in Hong Kong. My dad's German. My mom's from Taiwan. I was born there, spent 2 years in kindergarten in Germany, in Düsseldorf, actually. But spent most of my childhood in Hong Kong, studied at the German school, did a German international Abitur, so the high school diploma.
So just curiously, just quick interjection, your first language you learned was?
My first language was, my mother speaks Chinese with me, Mandarin Chinese, like the Taiwanese variant. And my dad always spoke German with me. And my parents speak English with each other. So like I grew up trilingually. And I'm super grateful that my parents were so disciplined in speaking their mother tongues, because growing up in an international environment, I know people that had the potential to learn 5 languages but ended up speaking 1, mostly English, obviously.
Yeah, well, I was just curious because you speak almost with like an American or Canadian accent.
Oh yeah, I get that a lot. Yeah. It's the international school accent, I'd say, because so like my spelling and writing is just completely British because that's how I learned it from the get-go. But like the cultural soft power of America is very effective.
Well, I won't blame you if you want to put a U after your O's. That's okay. Cool. So, Hong Kong.
Yeah, graduated. How I got to WHU was actually pretty simple. I looked up the best business universities in the German-speaking world, applied to Mannheim, St. Gallen, and WHU. Actually, for St. Gallen, because I was in Hong Kong, I did the GMAT with 17. So I got a place at St. Gallen, but I really enjoyed the process of getting into WHU, and took the place, took the spot when it was offered to me. Didn't get into Mannheim, but wouldn't have gone anyways. WHU was my first choice. Really happy about that. And then, I moved to Germany when I was 17. I really had going from 8 million people to 8,000 people was kind of tough. I had a bit of a culture shock at the beginning. I knew Germany, like I was there literally every summer and spent a bit of time in Germany before starting at WHU, but it was kind of a culture shock. So I was very not used to, just small village life, right? And coupled with the stress of studies and everything.
Yeah, and you're young.
I was 17 when I moved. Yeah,
crazy. And you came from one of the most bustling metropolises in the world to a tiny little village on the Rhine. But you also probably didn't look like everyone else there. I know WHU has made a big push towards diversity. I think it's an ongoing battle, but did you feel like you instantly fit in?
No. So the thing is, looking back, I don't blame the people. A lot of them, grew up in villages on the countryside of Germany, and I would say most of the questions I got were innocent, but having to answer for the 5th time that I've never eaten dog does kind of get taxing, and you're just in those young years you're just also asking yourself, coupled with the stress of studying and the new environment and everything, not having your parents around, you do kind of start questioning why aren't these guys accepting me? I thought that this would be different, right? But I made some good friends. It's funny because a lot of them have some international connection or kids of immigrants. But there were incidents. Yeah, there were incidents at WHU. And I actually joined the panel discussion last week at the Diversity Weeks at WHU. Talked a bit about my experience there. And diversity matters. That's definitely a case. If I can tell you, my experiences, absolutely diversity does matter. I'm super grateful for WHU doing a positive push, not just the university, but also student initiatives and stuff.
Yeah. I think it's important that people understand when we talk about diversity mattering, this isn't necessarily a social good piece. There's a utility to that too, especially being an entrepreneur, right? And building a startup. The more lenses you can see the world through, and the more diversity of people that you can understand, the better off that you are. So, it's always been a big topic and a big focus for me, and I think it wins in the end. It's not just about doing good.
The thing is what I always try to say, also in the panel discussion, I said that look, you're in the hustle and bustle of founding a startup, right? You're at WHU, you don't learn how to code an app, right? So at the end of the day, you're like, oh shit, I need to build an app. I need somebody to help me with this. And you're flipping through your Rolodex, you're looking at LinkedIn, and you're like, oh, okay, this is the first person that said yes. Oh, he's a white cis male. At that moment, do you care? You're gonna hire him, you're gonna get him, right? So a lot of the times, especially in Germany, which is quite very homogenous and compared to let's say Netherlands, you're not gonna this is not gonna be a priority. But what I always try to tell people is humans are social. Humans are tribal animals, right? We associate ourselves with people that look like us, that think like us, that share a background and share opinions as well. So if you're in the process, and like everyone in the world says they would only hire the best person, but just that's the same thing as saying like I'm not a racist.
Right.
Nobody would say I'm a racist, right? Nobody would say no, I'm hiring a person that looks like me. But you have to. I always tell founders or just in general, you just have to address your own unconscious bias. You have to be like, okay, am I really hiring this person because they're the best? Or am I hiring this person because they look like me because it's comfortable, right? I've also have a negative example, which is like prime example of why the business case of diversity matters. Is when I was in Amsterdam, we're skipping. we'll circle back, but like I worked in the moving industry, like moving house, and we tried to hire a content writer, right? And we only had male applicants, and the best person for the job was this girl that just she just got fired from her first job because the company went insolvent, and she was by far the best for a travel startup. We approached her, and I spent a whole working day trying to convince her to come to our company. We did we wrote together, we looked at different topics we could write, and she was really enthusiastic. And at the end of the day, she rejected us because she got an offer from Treatwell. I'm not saying it's because it's a female industry, but it's because there was not a single female in our company, and at the same time, like the whole industry, the moving industry, it was like there are no women in this industry. So I wouldn't say, like, if you would ask her, did you reject this because there were no women in the company? She'd definitely say no, but like it was an unconscious bias. Yeah. What am I trying to say with this is literally 50% of the workforce didn't apply for us. Mm-hmm. Like we had half the talent pool, and half of anything in a startup context can mean the difference between success and failure, right?
Yeah, it's I think it just reiterates the fact that you need to have a conscious commitment to this earlier in the process, because frankly, diversity begets diversity. And a lot of people that I know, friends and colleagues that are people of color, and they're looking at an opportunity, they want to make sure that diversity already exists, right? I mean, you don't want to be the sole woman in a sea of men. I mean, maybe some people are okay with that, and that's fine, but if you don't make that commitment early, it gets a lot harder to do it after the fact.
And I mean, at the end of the day, it's like I'm not a big fan of making diversity a business case, because at the end of the day, it is the right thing to do, right? Why should some people have less of a chance than others just because of the color of their skin, their sexual orientation, what have you? Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like the beginning of WHU was marked by that culture shock. That the first realization that I was like different. My dad's from the very southwest of Germany, city near Basel, so I'm right at the border.
Konstanz?
No, it's Lörrach.
Okay, gotcha. So my family's from the other side of the Bodensee.
Yeah, nice. A little bit more east. No, but Lörrach is extreme. Like This always surprises me because it's very it feels quite rural, but people are so tolerant. Like it's just because you're at the French, Swiss, German border. I guess it just gives a lot of turnover in people, and people are just so ridiculously tolerant. And so I never had that association with Germany. But once I came to WHU, it got a lot better. Obviously when people first realized, okay, man, this guy who speaks, Chinese additionally and English natively, he has this big advantage compared to me, who only speaks German. It really, once that first internship or exchange semester happened, the people grow up, right? Looking back at it, the other students grew up.
Tribes change.
Yeah. Once they notice, especially if you're on exchange semester and you have people from all creeds and nations, you're just like, okay, I'm not gonna, what's the point of clinging to this archaic idea of a tribe?
Right. So WHU.
Did my bachelor's.
And you were committed. You were like, I want to go into business.
Yeah, I did.
Did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or were you just interested in the broader
I
concept?
was interested in the broader scope of it. Like I thought it was like, especially like growing up in Hong Kong, I was very surrounded by it as well. Being like, the financial capital of Asia, the logistics capital. My dad worked for Metro, so worked in sourcing. And it was extremely like, I was very surrounded by it. And it's just something that I grew up with and something I really wanted to emulate, to do. And what it fascinated me about it was just the versatility of business, where you can be like, okay, literally every company needs a business guy. So I can really go to, like if I want to go to a nuclear power plant or something, like they all need a business guy. But I was always fascinated with tech, definitely. Did I know if I wanted to be an entrepreneur? No. I did watch, like, I guess I watched it with my dad, but I did watch every Apple presentation there was. Ever since key memory is the first iPhone presentation, where I was like, I want an iPod and I want a phone. Like, why the hell would you just combine it? Like, I like to have those two devices separated. And then, like, the first iPhone came out, because, the rumor mill was swirling. And when the iPhone came out, it was like, oh, shit, this is cool. So I just grew up with, like, tech and gadgets and all of that. Hong Kong being super modern back then. It lost its track.
Things have changed recently there.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, I always thought like international management would be my thing. I did my exchange semester in Beijing, did it in Chinese. I did an internship in San Diego, was back in Hong Kong at Commerzbank, and just tried to broaden my scope. But once I graduated, like the dad of a friend of mine approached me and said, "Hey, I need a guy like you." They had a startup doing like drinking powders. That was really fun. So I was in Hong Kong, just doing the accounting and everything, and then like I get a call and they say like, "Hey, can you organize like a conference in Chicago?" Flew over there, organized that. So that was my first job out of university. The founder he told me in a very French. He got mad at me because I was practicing French on Duolingo, because he said like, "Oh yeah, well now you can understand my secret language. I don't want that." So that was the kind of person that I had to deal with. And he told me, "Daniel, I'm a marketing genius. Like you should just do what I tell you." So I was like, okay, this is not it. Waited for my master's actually in Hong Kong. Back lived with my mom again. Waited for a master's. Did a few startup events just for fun in Hong Kong. And then I get a call by my friend Yannis Fischer, actually, and he was working for Rocket in Hong Kong, and he was like, hey man, Oliver Samwer was just here, and can you do finance? I was like, yeah, sure, I can do finance. I didn't tell him that I flunked the first finance module. But he was like, yeah, can you do finance? I said, yeah, sure. When can you be here? And I said, well, I don't know, in an hour. I have nothing to do this afternoon. He was like, oh, no, come tomorrow morning. Started the next day. Cleaned up finance as a freelancer first. 2 weeks in, the head of APAC comes in and was like, hey, this guy, he speaks Chinese, he speaks German, he speaks English, he's born and raised here, he's from WHU, and then these 2 weeks, more has happened than, in the last 2 months, so what are we waiting for? Let's hire him. So I became CFO of Foodpanda Hong Kong with 23. Wow. So,
and do you attribute that? It's a really cool story, and obviously you've got this WHU connection, right, kind of coming into a rocket venture, but you also have this, this rich kind of language base. Do you attribute that opportunity to one or the other, or both, or?
Well, it's synergistical, right? I would say Well, like when I was there, it was, I mean, Giannis came in straight from Germany, first time in Asia, did a tremendous job, but like, he was the German manager who told people what to do. And but didn't understand like the cultural context. Well, whilst I kind of was like, from the beginning, like kind of his translator, kind of, if that makes sense. Not necessarily language, but more like culturally. That was a really good working relationship. But yeah, no, absolutely. Like the finance team that I built up, and like our working language was Chinese. We like obviously we clicked much faster. We had a lot of like drivers from China, and also like Indian drivers with whom I could just like they related to me faster than they did with my like white expat colleagues, because they were all like lived in Hong Kong for ages. So
Curiously, my first company I built, my business partner was a friend from grad school, and he was from the mainland, from Wuhan. Oh, cool. Which obviously has become a much more famous city than it was back then. But I remember, he came to grad school in British Columbia where I was, didn't speak any English. Oh, wow. And by the end, he wrote an incredible master's thesis that I helped him edit. But it was on the topic of Guangxi.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that? I guess you might be familiar with that concept. Guangxi is basically
okay. Sorry.
I'm also probably butchering the pronunciation on that.
Guangxi.
Guangxi, yeah. But, the basic concept is like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And
relationships are everything.
Relationships are everything. Like, so did coming from Hong Kong, did having that language, did that Guangxi, does that play into those experiences?
I'm pretty sure it did. The thing is though, like when I meet Hong Kong people, so my mom always like spoke Mandarin with me, right? She was very, I remember this one scene with this one core memory where me and my brother were watching Digimon on the TV, and it was in Cantonese, and she came up and switched it off or switched the channel. I don't remember, but she was just like, I don't want you guys to mix the dialects because it is too close, like, so I don't know if it's a trauma or if the languages are those that different, but like when I meet a Hong Kong person and they're like, oh, okay, they said in Guangdonghua, I'm like, oh, sorry, like I don't speak Cantonese, and I was like, what? So like there's that barrier as well. So, but Mandarin definitely, like it definitely helped. They're more comfortable depends on who you ask, of course, but like most of my employees were in Hong Kong back then were more comfortable speaking Mandarin than English. And it was definitely like, the way we communicated was definitely a bit more, on the same cultural wavelength. It wasn't necessarily Guangxi, it was more like the boss and employee relationship was much more, like culturally on the same wavelength, right? And I had this funny incident. I talked about this on my last podcast
with Oliver.
Yeah, exactly. Where my accountant, like a great guy, really brilliant. He really got to work, super pragmatic, and like I told him to account for the meals that we expensed ourselves, because we were a delivery company, right? And so the meals that we expensed ourselves, like how to like account for it, right? And then he did it, and then like 2 weeks later, we looked at the books and we were like, there's kind of cash missing, right? And he was cash missing from the like cash versus profit P&L, and he was like. And I asked him, and he was like, yeah, no, I would have done it like this. I'm like, why didn't you tell me, right? Why didn't you tell me? We're a startup, we're like, be pragmatic about it. Like I don't want to have that boss-employee relationship, the traditional one, right?
So he was just following orders, basically.
Just following orders, and, but I would say like the way I could approach it, the way I could tell him, man, like, let's break this up. The way I could address this issue was Yeah, I attribute that to the cultural upbringing that I had. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such an interesting dynamic. I spent better part of 8 years working in Africa,
Right.
And I faced very similar dynamics, right? Where I would try to create a collaborative environment, but there was a deference. And I think, I don't want to try to unpack it sociologically too much, whether it's, colonialism or, the Oriental and the other, but for some reason it was very, very difficult until you built long-standing, meaningful relationships of love and trust. It was very, very hard to kind of collaborate. If you were the boss, you were making the decision.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm doing the same thing right now, which is another time jump, but it is an untangling, right? It is a cultural question, also just company culture question, right? There are companies out there where it's the boss makes the decision and employees just execute. That's not my management philosophy. It's also not my cultural philosophy, right?
I think it's really interesting, particularly in Germany. My father and my uncles generation, and I'm assuming the generations before them, didn't fraternize with their staff. No. It was extremely hierarchical, right? The boss told you what to do and you zipped your lip and you did what they say. It was very, very top down. And obviously I think the next generation, those were boomers and earlier. I think over time that divide has closed a little bit, but there are times, particularly in older family-owned businesses, Mittelstand, things like that, where you really do see that kind of top-down management style. And then here in the startup world, particularly in Berlin, where it's very international, I think there's more of a culture of bottom-up or collaboration, but you do see those personality clashes still more than you think. And oftentimes it's this is the way my dad taught me how to do business, or my grandfather taught me how to do business, and deconstructing that kind of mentality, I think, becomes a challenge.
Absolutely. Why do you hire people, right? Why do you hire people? Do you hire people because they should do their job? That might work in a startup, but most of the time it doesn't. You normally hire people to tell you what to do.
Steve Jobs' best quote ever.
Yeah, you got to quote the best. But I was in a meeting recently where all the employees still had that mentality of their boss telling them what to do, and I was I'm not a tech guy, and they it was a video call, and they were okay, so Daniel, tell us what to do. I'm hold up. Explain it to me as if I was a 3-year-old, because I didn't understand half of this meeting's content. How are you, what would you do? And they were nobody's asked me this before. It was crazy. And you always want to hire people that are better at what you do, right? The movie, this is also over quoted, but the Steve Jobs movie where he says, I play the orchestra and you play an instrument, right? That's the role of the CEO, right? The role of the CEO is to hold it all together, and see how all these moving parts are working together, but not the best sales guy is most of the times not the best head of sales, right? You want people to tell you what to do in their skill set, right?
Yeah. I always reckon that the good founders and the good leaders are facilitators.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Maybe that's not as romantic as being the conductor of the symphony, but in the end, it's about empowering people to do their best. And now I'll steal a quote, which is from Daniel Pink. It's if you give people autonomy, if you give them the ability to achieve mastery, and you give them a sense of purpose, and then you coordinate all of those talents and all of those motivations across an organization, that's where the best leaders, I think, succeed. Absolutely. And that is the space. In the end, it doesn't matter if you're building technology or you're selling widgets, you're in the people business.
Absolutely, and I think this is something that WHU is, or a lot of WHU alumni get wrong, in my opinion. Like I've met a bunch that really believe that they're the ones creating value, but I haven't met a single, or I have, but like 90% of the founders didn't build the app. 90% of the founders did not do the call to find the supplier, or what have you. Or build the machine or whatever, right? Like, and I think that's one of the things where that a lot of WHU founders or young founders, for that matter, can learn from. You're the facilitator. You're not the value creator.
That's right. The idea is the easy part.
The idea is the easy part. The execution is the hard part. That humility of being a CEO is, I think, what also defines me as my management style, I would say. Yeah.
So I want to hear how you got there.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Let's go back.
We did a bit of a time jump.
That's okay. That's okay. As long as the stories are compelling, people will follow. So you're at Food Panda. You are now a super young CFO of a well-funded, fast-growing company in Asia.
Yeah. Super fun. Like what I was saying earlier, like this was our accelerator. It was amazing because we had literally unlimited money. And our main objective was growth, right? Like, and we had the call from Mark Summer saying like, why didn't you hit your numbers? Why didn't you spend more, right? So the thing is, like, I was doing the budgets, and once a month, like there would be a budget call with Berlin, and they would, I would answer a few questions, and they would just transfer, a six-figure euro sum, and it was basically running a startup without having cash constraints. And as you know as well, like having cash constraints and fear of cash running out is half of the work of a founder. So that was really cool. Learned a huge bunch. Left the company and went to Berlin. The growth slowed. We had a manager that came from Berlin that really like took the wind out of our sails. Sadly, because it was one hell of a ride. But don't have to go into that, but like it was too bad having to leave, or not having to leave, but we wanted to leave. All of us wanted to leave because there was just not that speed anymore that we had over the 12 months that we were there.
It's an interesting piece worth pausing on because we were talking a little bit offline, like how I see myself as a 0 to 1 guy. That is my happy space. And the reason it's that way, it's because it's fast and it's dynamic and the learning curve is through the roof and you're always on your toes. You kind of mentioned that the speed and the inertia started to change. I'm curious, like, I think all businesses do that. That curve starts to flatten out inevitably. You can't have a hockey stick forever, right? Do you find that, and I don't want to call anyone out or anything, but is that triggered by a change in personnel and a change in culture, or just a change in trajectory of the business?
Change in culture, like I've no doubt about it. The guy that came in, he really he was a manager of more the keeping up looks caliber than actually like executing. Like I still work with Yannis a lot, and Yannis was a guy, like he was the managing director of the company back then, and he was the guy that talked to the drivers, or they have these little driver clubs. He was the guy that talked to the drivers and talked to the restaurant owners as well, like the important ones. He was the guy that was like on the floor talking to Feng, our head of customer support, etc. Like there was so much fire in that company and what we were doing, and this guy came in, this new MD, and like I just remember him asking about like how does cash like 3 months in or something, and he was asking like one of the drivers like how does the cash collection work with the restaurants, and we were like we don't have, like the driver was like we don't have that, like that's like Hong Kong doesn't have that restaurant cash relationship, and it was just like, and he was just oblivious. And he just, like he didn't care. Like we cared so much, maybe a bit too much. But it was just so fun. And it was a change in personnel, a change of culture. Sadly, we weren't ready to leave. I mean, after we left, or around the time when we left, the WHU came in Hong Kong and just like grabbed market share. It was a land grab. I mean, we wanted to hire, like the drivers were the bottleneck, like the delivery guys. That was the bottleneck. So what happened was we had this compensation scheme for the drivers, and we had literally 3 meetings and we still didn't decide it. And Deliveroo came in, took our compensation scheme and just ran with it, and all the drivers switched over to Deliveroo. That was
So it goes, right?
So it goes, yeah. I mean, it's too bad.
So you jumped ship, you moved
Berlin.
back to the motherland.
Yeah.
But to a new city. You hadn't been in Berlin before. You hadn't lived in Berlin.
I hadn't lived in Berlin. I visited before, but I hadn't lived in Berlin. But yeah, going to the startup mecca. I moved to Berlin, did a few odd jobs. Worked in finance at Movinga. That was what a ride that was. It was really short, but oh my God, those were 3 intense months.
I can only imagine. That might have to be a separate episode.
That is a separate episode. But I was responsible for writing off a lot of outstanding payments and collecting a lot of cash. Was extremely fun, but that was a bubble that burst after my time. 3 months, very intense. Did a few other odd jobs, and then basically I met up with an old friend of mine, old alumni from WHU, same year as me, David Chanetsky, and he was like, "Hey man, I have this cool idea. Like, how about we do student tax returns, Studentensteuererklärung?" Because I don't know if it still happens at WHU, but there's this company, this large insurance company that sells insurances. Their way in is having a website called University Initiative, and then the city, Stuttgart, Duisburg, whatever. And then this consultant came, the sales, they act like they're a student-led conference or something, and then this sales guy comes in, presents why you should do your tax return as a student. Guys, do it. And then tries to sell you and sell the students insurances, right? So we were like, we could actually build a tech solution to this. And then we started with student tax returns, Studentensteuererklärung, and that went viral. That just completely went off. We posted in Facebook groups, and we spammed basically, right? And we just got 20 reshares. That was still the Facebook was still buzzing.
That is the most German URL I've ever heard of.
Studentensteuererklärung.de. Yeah. But the hilarious thing is everyone, English native speakers, they're always like, "What the hell?" And Germans are always like, "Oh no, that's super cool."
You can SEO the shit out of that, I imagine, too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, we were number 1 from the very beginning. So what we did is we actually we started doing all these different domains. We were doing specialized tax tools, and the second one we did was Bundeswehrsteuererklärung. So for soldiers, we did policemen, we did teachers, we did doctors, etc. But then it flattened out, because if you're going to do an engineer tax return, people are going to be like, what's the difference, right?
But it was basically the same infrastructure that was just rebranded for another target audience.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we ask questions such as, what's your address at home? What's your home address? What's your address, university address? And then, you said, okay, I was there for 3 days a week, and then it would automatically calculate the costs of that. And then we asked the same thing for study groups, but the speciality of study groups is you can only deduct one way. You can't deduct the way back. It's weird. But if you would just do it with the normal tax form, you wouldn't have that UI, UX.
Right.
Whilst with police men and women, we would just be we would rephrase it saying how many to the police station, how many days a week were you there? So it was a lot of surface polishing, but it was also very a lot of specific questions. like such as, a policeman and a policewoman always have uniforms that they have and they have to clean as well. So that those costs they deducted. So we always showed that field, while students don't. It's not work related to clean their clothes. Yeah. So we did a lot of special UI UX features for the individual, but it was all the same code base. It was all the same backend.
So it started to grow pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was really fast. We looking back, it was amazing. We started free, and then we started monetizing by doing 35 euros per tax return. And looking back, it was just crazy. I'd say within 15 months or something, we hit €1 million lifetime revenue. And this is 5 months of being free, right? So essentially we took 10 months to hit $1 million or something in revenue. It was really viral. It was really cool. We raised a bunch of money from a London fund called Profounders and a fund from Cologne called Capnamic. Right. But yeah, after about 1.5 years, me and my co-founder, we didn't see eye to eye on everything. We had a bit of a different vision for the company. Long story short, we had a bit of a mediation session, the investors and us. It was I'm very happy and very thankful for them for being the grown-ups, to put it that way, because if we wouldn't have had that mediation session or mediation in general, I don't think we would have gone apart, gone our separate ways the way we did. So we had those mediation sessions, and at the end of the day, I left the company, which sucked, but it was the right thing to do back in the day. We really had we didn't see eye to eye on stuff, and sometimes it's just the better thing to do, right? It's like counseling, like relationship counseling, right? If a result can also be that it just won't work out. Right.
But to be clear, when you say you left the company, you didn't leave the masthead or the cap table. You just left the employment.
Yes. Yeah.
So you still were a shareholder. You were still a founder.
Exactly. Yeah.
I do find it, it's almost a blessing that you had such two competent VCs Absolutely. On your cap table, because, number one fail point of a startup.
Co-founder conflict,
Absolutely. team across the board. And a lot of times angels aren't, they aren't prepared. They're not resourced to be able to do those kind of mediations. I think
it's not their job.
Good VCs do that regularly, right? So that's almost part of their kind of toolkit to be able to support their ventures. So you got some really good kind of mediation in that process that made it amicable, I guess.
Absolutely. So that was fun. No, not fun. No, that was not fun, but it was good. It was healthy.
How was that? As someone that has left a company that I've founded before, there's a lot of emotion and identity tied up in that. One of the things that I try to teach young founders that I work with is, I have this mantra, is you are not your startup, and repeat that daily over and over again, because it's amazing how quickly those lines get blurred, right? So much, founders talk about the highs and lows of the entrepreneurial journey, but it's not their personal highs and lows. Yeah. Their highs and lows are tied to the highs and lows of the venture itself, right? So good day, lots of sales, something raised funds, everyone's happy. Bad day, something's in the shitter, I feel miserable. So you become inextricably kind of interwoven with that venture. And then if you do end up in a situation where you separate from this kind of baby that you've, built and nurtured, for me at least, there was a bit of a void there, and I had some healing I had to go through. How was that separation for you?
I mean, it's exactly as you said. It was healing, right? It is so tied it's like creating something, and then it gets taken away from you. Like, absolutely, you do like ask your, because you have also, like, looking back, I had so many ideas still to be explored, still to be done, and then also just the feeling of, man, this is unfair, right? Like, at the end of the day, right, like, you gotta looking back, I didn't do everything right. I also didn't, like, still being very young, I would tell myself, like, just don't take it that seriously. Don't take yourself that seriously. Don't take this whole role that seriously, right? I really thought I was onto something here with this tax return thing. But, like, if I would put myself in my shoes back then, I would have probably quit earlier. I would have probably, like, tried to have that talk way earlier.
Just for your own well-being?
For my own well-being, for my sanity, because, like, that's just how. It's in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important, right? Because if you fail at a company, it feels like the end of the world, but just get up and do your next thing, right? It's not that hard to find the next thing. It's much, like, it is hard. Like, don't get me wrong, founding a company, having a good idea is friggin' hard, but it's still easier than, like, repairing your broken soul of failing.
I mean, that's it. When you're a founder, you're dealing with so much conflict, right? Conflict with the market, conflict with your product, conflict with your messaging. You're constantly trying to fix things that are somewhat broken or are not functioning at full capacity. When you take conflict with people and throw that into the equation, which comes with a whole lot of different neurochemicals than you have, dealing with a product that's buggy or something, like that becomes a pretty fucking heavy weight to carry around with you, So did you feel like you were carrying a burden and a weight for a long time before you? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, I would always have, like, I remember walking home, like every day I would just walk home. Like, I had that half an hour walking home through a park, and I was just like, I'm like, looking back, it's like, how did I actually walk through a park in the middle of the night? Because I'm such a scaredy cat. I'm like, I flinch when it's dark and everything, and I'm like, how is it possible that I was able to, like, walk through that dark park? But I just needed it. Like, I just needed that solitude of just, like, having my thoughts sorted out. I called a friend sometimes, but most of the time it was just, like, me and my thoughts. So yeah, no, it was you have to deal with it.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating way that you describe that walk through the park, because that's something that I felt during my experience like that, which was I was so deep in my own head and my own feelings that I kind of lost spatial awareness and I wasn't very present, and it affected my other relationships outside of work too, because it was just so consuming for me. Yeah. So when the separation was agreed upon, obviously there was some trauma and some emotions tied up. Was there a sense of relief?
Yeah, as well. Like, I mean, it was, the thing is, like, there was a sense of relief, but, like, it didn't last long. And it also, because I then immediately jumped into the next thing, because Yannis actually came up to me and he was like, man, I have this project that I'm running, which is like a co-working space. We have this project where we don't have an MD. So do you want to, like, do it? Because I kind of need you. And then I jumped head into this role of like setting up a co-working space, scaling spaces in Berlin. It was completely different because, like, I was really focused on marketing and growth and like online stuff, and this was like suddenly like literally brick and mortar, right? And so it was always clear to me that it would be an interim role because I wanted to stay in that online growth, online marketing world. So I mean, it wasn't the most healthy coping mechanism, I'd say, but, like, I did pour, like, that into the next thing, right? Yeah. It was my rebound.
Fair enough. We can do that.
Yeah. No, that was extremely fun. Did that for quite a while. Hired my successor and like co-MD / successor, Martin Balvik, great guy. I don't know if you've met him, also WHU Alumni.
It's interesting. A quick aside that's probably not that relevant, but when I was exploring doing my PhD at WHU, and I met this prof, and he said, why don't you, I was living in Colorado, he said, why don't you fly to Berlin and let's meet. I'm taking my master in entrepreneurship students on a tour of the startup scene in Berlin. I said, okay. So I flew over. He said, here's where we can meet on the first day. And it was upstairs at Scaling Spaces.
That was the building.
Yeah. So my very first touch point with WHU was at Scaling Spaces.
Very cool. Well, that was my co-baby.
So that would have been the fall of 2018.
Yeah, fits. Yeah, absolutely. No, Martin's a great guy. He was he ran it after I left.
And he led it to exit?
No, it's still running.
Okay. I thought there was an acquisition there.
No, it's still running. There was a bunch of consolidation in recent years, but Scaling Spaces is not yet, I guess, one of them. No, but the thing is, like I said, it was always clear it was marketing, it was interim, marketing in the future. So actually, a friend of mine reached out, who I worked with at Food Panda, and he was back in the moving, he was in the moving game, and he was like, "Hey man, we think lead gen for moving companies that really works. Do you want to join us with your experience with your online marketing stuff?" I flew over to Amsterdam. He's Dutch. Flew over to Amsterdam and set up the first few marketing campaigns, and I really liked it. I really liked the team, and then I flew over, and then we worked together, and it was like, yeah, this is cool. And I moved to the Netherlands. I moved to Amsterdam because I was also like, okay, I was here in Berlin for 2.5 years. Not my favorite city necessarily. And maybe I wanted to check out other places as well. And then didn't get that far, went to the Netherlands.
I just want to connect the dots on something because, you were in Hong Kong and you were a super young CFO. Right. And then, obviously you guys founded what would become Wundertax, right? And then you kind of did some other roles, and now you're getting hired on the marketing side. Was it the role that you had founding Wundertax that kind of taught you a lot of that performance marketing skill set?
Yeah, that was Wundertax. Yeah, we did a lot. I was responsible for marketing and stuff like that. That was my main responsibility.
I think there's just an interesting lesson there, right? Which is, it's probably less valuable to study finance or study marketing or study something in school as it is to, dive in the fucking deep end and do it with your own money on the line. Absolutely. You can become an expert in something because those lessons are so deeply ingrained in you because you have skin in the game.
Yeah. Absolutely. The thing is, the finance work that I did, that was very, it sounds a bit weird, but the finance, marketing nowadays, online marketing has much more to do with finance than whatever they teach you in university, on the topic of marketing, because you're looking at click-through rates, you're looking at conversion rates, you're looking at, what's my return on advertising spend, etc. It's very numbers driven. But I think my marketing philosophy is probably also the subject of another podcast.
Right. Cool. So you go to Amsterdam.
I go to Amsterdam, yeah. Start.
Which is a pretty great city. I was just there the other weekend.
Fantastic city. Yeah, absolutely. It's such a livable city as well. It's really built for humans, and not for cars or just packing as many people as possible in the same place. It's a small city. It's 800,000, relatively small, 800,000 people, super international. But you underestimate how much quality of life being able to bike everywhere it actually is. So moved to Amsterdam and we scaled up this company. I did a lot of marketing there. I did a lot of like all the hands-on stuff. But then Corona hit and we were like, okay, we tried all these growth hacks. The biggest value add that moving companies have is doing things in cash, because can you do that much value add that you compensate for the 21% in VAT? So we never really got companies to get more services from us except for these marketing services, which was fine because we doubled down on that and we actually bought a local competitor.
So you were a marketplace then?
We were a marketplace, yeah. We were a marketplace we're a lead gen for moving companies. But we doubled down on this and bought a local competitor. So we became market leader in the Netherlands. We bought a international moving platform, which was insolvent from Berlin, actually from also founded by WHU guys. Relocatedly bought them, or the assets at least, and then we bought our biggest project, which was an international lead provider based in Australia, but Dutch guys, so that was a funny connection. And that was our largest acquisition. And it was fantastic. It was a really good, it was a great story. We did a roll-up game. We bought these companies. We did essentially the same thing, but we could have one back end. We could have the same marketing campaigns. We had the same leads, but with a much larger pool of moving companies, and just had those, very obvious synergies coming in. And so we were able to buy all these companies, raised a round with a few angels, but then we also LBO'd. We bought them with leverage, and that was really fun. But to me, it was also like, okay, well, we're buying companies. This is M&A. This was really fun. We did 3 different types of acquisitions. But if I wanted to do that, I would have, gone into banking, gone into PE. So to me, I had that nagging voice in my head saying like, you have to go back to business. Mm-hmm. And did a bunch of interim CMO stuff. Interim head of marketing, did a lot of interim CMO for an Atlantic Labs venture. I did a bunch of consulting stuff, but then I reached out to my old investors again at Wundertax, and they actually, long story short, it felt really good. I told them I made a business case. A new MD was there. He said I want to sell the company, and I I was with the investors and I was like, the business case, this is still a great business.
So you're saying there was a new MD in Wundertax at that point, not your co-founder.
David actually left.
And that guy wanted to sell the company.
The guy wanted to sell the company, and then I was like, okay, this is still a great business case, right? This company, because I still got the monthly reports and everything, and this is a great business case, and I appealed to the investors as a concerned shareholder, saying hey guys, this company had 3 management changes. The whole team is I didn't know anybody at the team anymore, and it still has these great numbers. So did a back of the envelope calculation, and then the Sean from ProFounders was like, hey, let's hop on a call. And it felt really good. It was really good. Everyone was on speaking terms. We went into the whole breakup, I'd like to call it, but everyone was still on speaking terms. It was a really friendly conversation, and it felt good. And Sean asked the big question, hey man, what are you doing right now? And that's how I got back to Wundertax.
But you didn't come in and say, hey, I've got a plan. I'm pitching you a strategy to keep this alive. It was like, hey, I think this has legs. And then they asked you to.
Basically, yeah. I mean, it was mutual, right? I was like, what are you doing? And then the conversations after that were like, okay, what are your ideas? And then, had a bunch of them. So that's how I became CEO of Wundertax 2.0, a refounder.
A refounder. I love that. I love that word that you use. So I think a lot of people that kind of maybe had to leave their company, would leave with some bitterness, some negativity would be kind of left in their wake. I've always been a believer of like try to keep things above board. Relationships are everything, but sometimes our emotions get the best of us. Like, do you feel like in retrospect now, it was the way that you handled your departure that enabled your return down the road?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say it was just, like the level of professionalism was very high when I left. The thing is, my dad always says you close the door silently, right? You don't slam the door. So, but I think that departure, of course, there was a certain sense of bitterness was I in active contact with the two investors over the years? Not really. I had a chat with our principal, the principal at Capnamic, who I also consider my mentor, Hannes Rode. He's like, we had a bit of like sporadic contact, but it wasn't like I was actively in contact. But, like the memory they had, or the impression that they had of me is like, this guy is quite integer, and this guy is not, he's not an asshole. And I think it was just like we handled it was a grown-up talk, right? And what really convinced me to come back was when Jörg from Capnamic actually said, like, hey man, you have entrepreneurial freedom. Like, go in, take a look around, and tell us what to do.
So that hence the refounder and not, interim manager. I'm not the
interim manager. I'm not the M&A M&A consultant or whatever. No, he told me, like, get in, tell us what to do. And it's been a really great ride since then. This was January.
Really fresh still, too.
It's still fresh.
I want to ask you one question, and please tell me if I'm crossing a line. It's not something that you can talk about. But when I left the company that I built, I had such a significant chunk of the cap table that it was in the investors, the existing shareholders' best interest to make me an offer to buy me out. Because I could have essentially saddled them with complexity and held up decision making, because I had so much of the company. I don't know what your cap table position looked like, but was that ever put on the table? No. Like, Daniel's leaving, we should just buy him out? No. So you still had one foot in the game regardless.
Yeah. It was all a very lucky series of events and coincidences, back in the day, when I joined, having, just the fact that I still had the investor reports, the fact that, I only knew about the company being sold because the MD, called me and told me, because I didn't sign some something like some how do you call it, like a board decision. I didn't sign something, and so it was just a lucky series of coincidences, and that. But it was, I'd say, there's this also, we're big on the quotes today, but there's this great saying, which is opportunity is preparation. Luck is preparation meets opportunity, right? And I think I was at the right place at the right time, and it worked out.
Yeah, amazing. So tell me about the past 11 months. You are now a refounder of the company that you built. You're the CEO of the company. What is life like now? And tell us a little bit about the 2022-23 Wundertax.
It's been super exciting. We've actually, what we've done is we in-housed. So actually, another part of the refounder story is I sat at the table in December with the head of online marketing back then and the senior engineer at Wundertax when I was still there. I was like, hey guys, I've got this Wundertax thing on the hook. Are you guys in? And they were like, dude, did you smoke too much weed in Amsterdam? like, what are you talking about, Wundertax? Like, and then I was like, no, seriously.
I'm back, baby.
I'm back, baby. I was like, I'm bringing the band back together, Blues Brothers. And they joined, the CMO and CTO. And
But they were still on the team.
No.
They had left also. So you really brought the old crew.
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, I brought the band back together, and we started like, we've done some drastic steps, right? We've said, okay, we're from a tech side, we're like, okay, we're a tax company, right? We're a tax online tool. We're not a company doing KYC. We're not a company doing content management systems, because these things were all like self-built. And we were like, okay, we have the freedom of being a profitable company with a good chunk of revenue and being like, we can actually, we're not a scrappy startup anymore. We don't have to think in actual cash costs. We can think in calculatory costs, right? We can think about, okay, if we remove this will save us. If we remove this and add a cloud service, this will cost us 100 euros per month, but it will save 20% of the developer's time, which is the equivalent of this much money, right? Like, you know what I'm talking about. In the beginning of a startup, you're always like, okay, you're counting your cash. Yeah. But like, we could actually like think in that way. We could be like, okay, no, we're saving efficiency by spending this money, right? So like that was our whole tech approach, being like, okay, everything in the cloud, of course, like, trying to get like the best in class solutions. So we had 3 different email providers. We cut that out, got SendGrid, which is like a really good tool. Sorry that I'm quoting so much, but like, Bruce Lee, a childhood hero of mine, always said like, cut out the non-essentials, right? Michelangelo, he didn't make a statue, he just removed the bits, right? So we always said like, let's remove all the unnecessary parts that are not part of the core, So that was our tech approach, making our super lean, super fast, which resulted in July, we actually built the property tax tool, Grundsteuererklärung. Our team built that within a month. From scratch. And I was we were all very impressed how, these guys rose to the occasion. The marketing side, we in-housed it. We got rid of our marketing agency. They're still doing like some SEO work for us, but basically we in-housed it. We started hiring people or retraining people to do marketing. We really said, okay, we focus on new customers, tax returns. We have their email addresses. We'll just write them an email telling them, here's a 10 euro voucher. Do your tax return with us. And we focused on new customers, and we've actually, in October, we've actually grown 60% year over year. October being the tax deadline of last year, the tax deadline of this year. And in terms of new customer revenue, we've actually grown 80% in October. So really proud of these things, and we're really bringing it back to growth.
That's what I'm glad you said that, because that's the piece that's kind of interesting to me, because now Wundertax is 6 years old? Is that right? 6 years old?
6 years. Yeah, 6 years. Yeah.
So, from an investor perspective or a VC perspective that tends to think of investments on 10-year life cycles, right? Or whatever you plug into the fund, it could 10 years or less, right? They're looking for 30, 40, 50x returns or write-offs, like nothing worse than a zombie. Yeah. It sounds in a way like, during the time you were gone and whatnot, you were hovering in that zombie space for a while. Now it was either, a low value trade sale, or it was let's bring the band back together and re-spark this.
Well, funny enough, that was not on their radar at all. So that was Well,
I'm just wondering what if expectations change for a venture-backed startup after so many years, like, is it now okay to build a non-hyper-growth company that is nicely profitable, that everybody can make returns off? Or do investors and maybe you don't know this because you're not in their heads, but is the expectation still, become a unicorn? And for you as well as the investors, I'm curious about.
So that is a fantastic question, because that's something I ask myself all the time. But to give you my 2 cents, like, yes, right now I always joke, like in our advisory board meeting, like they said, like, hey, show the world that you can still grow. And I was always joking, like, I think this is the only board meeting in Berlin where the investors tell me to not be profitable in this time and age, right? Like, we're just slightly unprofitable, right? We're not burning cash. I think right now it's like, I mean, I'm not saying anything new here, but right now it's good to keep your, like, not to overspend, not to be fiscally conservative, be diligent in what you spend, right? Like we also, like, we looked at our P&L a lot and just cut out the non-essentials, keep the cash close.
Do you mind if I interject on that? Because you say, right now it's a good time to be kind of fiscally responsible. When you say right now, I envision this in one of 2 concepts. One is there's a bit of an economic downturn. Yeah. There's a lot of kind of VC narrative about the well running dry. Yeah. Debatable, arguable. Nevertheless, there has been some macroeconomic changes. Yeah. On the other side, I'm guessing you're also a seasonal company, right? Yeah. You have one big peak and then you ride the wave getting ready for the next tax season. Exactly. When you're talking about kind of that responsibility during that time, is it because we're now doing this at the end of November and you have 10 months till you have your real big spike again? Or is this in the context?
It's a context of macroeconomic trends, right? Like we also have this big competitor, right? We have TaxFix, who just off the back of a new funding round of 220 million. Are we, like, I'm pretty realistic about the fact, like, considering like the macroeconomic trend and, like them raising this huge round, are we going to get, like, our VCs going to be crazy for us? Probably not. But having said that, like, I do see a lot of very cool growth ideas that we have, where we can basically prove, like, right now all we did was, we were cleaning up the company, we were priming it for growth, bringing it back to the right course. But did we do big moonshots? Not yet, right? Like, so, but we have a lot of ideas, and we think if we can find avenues of growth that are 10x ideas, and not, like, we're going to improve our conversion rate by 20%. I think that's something where we can respark interest. Right. But in terms of what the investors are looking at, like, I mean, I think, I'm not in their heads, obviously, but I do think that they're quite excited about, like, what is going on right now. But at the same time, of course, looking at their fund time, like, there has to be some exit at some point, right? So I think the market is also, like, the tax market, and as is also ripe for consolidation, because there are a lot of players. It's happening, right? Like, Ageras bought Contest. You probably know Contest. They bought them. There's a lot of stuff happening in the fintech world, and I just see a lot of synergies where it can work, where it could work. So, that's one way, but I also believe that there are a lot of, like, adjacent markets that we can work on and find that 10x.
It's interesting. This is a question, but I'm going to caveat it up front and say it's rhetorical.
Just as maybe I'm already saying it, but one thing I just wanted to add was also, like, of course, having a dividend model is not in any VC's interest. Like, right, we know the game, right? Yeah.
Well, I'll just say it again, because this is upfront, that this is a rhetorical question, because I would assume, having been in similar shoes, this is not a question that you can answer, but it's a thought that comes to mind, right? Like, you're a nice, stable company with some history behind you. You've got a competitor that, in some cases, at least capitalization-wise, looks like a behemoth. Yeah. There's kind of 2 approaches you can take. One is we're going to compete our asses off and we're going to chase market share. The other approach is we're going to skip profitability, double down on growth, and become one damn good acquisition target, right? Because now there's deep enough pockets in multiple places that, that could do that. So I think it puts you in an interesting, it's the opposite of a rock and a hard place. It's like being between two really interesting and compelling alternatives. Yeah. So I would imagine, and again, I'm not asking for an answer to that question, but I imagine there's something liberating being in a situation where, of course, anything can go wrong, but there's good options in both directions, essentially.
It's a great position. Like, there's nothing worse as a startup than running out of ideas to do, right? And we're definitely the opposite, right? Where there's so many things that we like, so many ideas, so many paths we can go down. I think I don't have a definite answer for you, but I do believe in the concept of intentionality. What a lot of corporates do wrong is keeping your options open, right? Like keeping your options open until both of them are gone. So I do believe that we are quite good at saying we're going to do this, right? And right now we're a small agile team and we're profitable. We're not, we're not with the backs against our wall. So our downside is pretty limited, but our upside is we find that 10x. Right. So that's what we're testing, right? Well, like I said, we built this property tax thing within a month because we're just so agile, which agile is an overused word, but we're just very fast and we don't have that overhead. Yeah. With 25 people, I know every single customer service person. Yeah. So we're all really pulling, and I love being in small teams. This is also maybe a good thing for founders, having a big team having a big team is not. So many people in Berlin equate a big team to success. That's right. And a big team is our bragging rights. Everybody's always like, how big is your team? Yeah. Right? But it says so little about, I don't know if you know Basecamp, right? They have a tiny team, but they're huge, like revenue wise, because it scales. Why do you need 200 salespeople if you can scale online, right? With online marketing.
Yeah, it's, to me, the size of the team does matter, but in the inverse way. I have now found, and after 4 or 5 experiences, that I cap out at about 15 or 16 people. At that point, I can still maintain. It's because relationships are important to me, and culture is so important to me, and kind of democratic processes are important to me, and open dialogue. And it gets harder and harder the larger you get. And what I find, I think I'm naturally an empath, so I want to make sure everyone's happy and enjoying their experience. Yeah. And the larger the organization gets, the harder it is for me to play that role. Yeah. And 25 is still pretty reasonable as well, but I couldn't imagine having to deal with hundreds of people. I think my quality of life would go down substantially. I'm 100% on your side. I want to know, obviously I can't, manage every aspect of the company or every person, but we have, I have a very competent C-level team that I trust 120%. And what is important to me though is knowing each and every person at the company, and it just caps out at 100, because then at that point you're just or I don't know, even earlier, probably 80, where you're just okay, who's that person that just walked by? Yeah, I always go back to my time working in Africa as a development economist, right? And it's success tends to come from building meaningful relationships of love and trust, right? Yeah. You build those relationships, they're meaningful, people are working together, they believe in each other, they trust each other, and that's where the magic happens, And it's just so hard. So many things fail at scale. Right?
Yeah. Fail at scale. 100%, yeah.
Damn it, Daniel, we're already like one of the longest episodes I've done in a long time, and I want to keep this conversation going because I'm digging it so much, and we've just been going off on fun tangents, but I got to call it this time. So bringing it back to my one little bit of structure, I ask every guest the same 3 questions. Yeah. So most of them hate it, but they get them anyways. So let's start with the first one. We've had a lot of life lessons already today, but in your circuitous path and all of these different experiences, you've gained a lot of life lessons, you've gained some wisdom along the way. Thinking of the next generation coming up at WHU or elsewhere, what have you learned in your founder journey that you wish you could go back and tell your younger self?
I think I already mentioned it. Like, don't take yourself too seriously. Like at WHU, like I said I flunked finance in the first try. Right, like you have that illusion, or you think everyone's doing great. You think everyone's having, great grades, and you're the only one being like, not good at university. But nobody's ever asked me what my grades were in my bachelor's. Give it your all. Be the best you can be. Like I'm not saying I'm not saying grades don't matter. I'm not saying like don't try hard, but but don't break yourself, right? Like don't do it to a point where it's unhealthy, because that has happened at WHU. Not to me. Like I think I managed it quite well, starting from the second, third semester, but like don't break it. Like don't take it too seriously. Don't take life too seriously.
It's interesting to hear you say that about that kind of like, striving for the top, especially in a highly competitive school like WHU. Not only, don't break yourself, but don't break others. Sometimes you see people that are trying to get that top of the ranking and get the best placement in the study abroad or whatever. And not only are you beating yourself up, but then you're...
Look, during the second semester, this is during the 5th semester, my brother got very ill. So he had a brain tumor with 21. So that was devastating, right? But my dad said, you can't do anything. He's going to be in Switzerland. You can visit him all the time. But that was just such a reality check. I started going to the gym a lot, started drinking way less at WHU, and started, not taking the whole university thing that serious, because life is, you hear it so often, life is short, but I also think life is not that serious, because there are bigger problems out there, right? Same thing with founding a startup. Don't break yourself, right? Like go easy on yourself.
Yeah. I love that you said don't take yourself so seriously, because one of the things we didn't touch into on this that we talked about offline is you do a little bit of comedy on this as well.
I do. I do. Yeah.
Does that help? Is that an outlet?
It's an outlet. I haven't been doing a lot in Berlin yet, sadly. Didn't find the time in between all the refounding, but it is an outlet. It is an amazing hobby. It's a lot of fun. It's the quintessential thing about not taking yourself too seriously. And I think in the role of a CEO, it really is a valuable skill to be able to laugh about yourself or about the failure of your company, or if you'd said something stupid in a meeting.
That's right. That's great. All right. A couple other questions, a little bit of insights into you. One of the things I feel like I can learn so much about a person is by what's on their bookshelf. Is there a book you're reading? Is there something on your bedside table?
Yeah, but I fall asleep all the time, which is Why We Sleep.
Why We Sleep. Matthew Walker.
Yes,
love
Matthew
that
Walker.
book.
Yeah, he prefaces it with, "It's a compliment that if you fall asleep while reading this book," and that's what's happening all the time. That's a book I'm reading. I'm also listening to World War Z. Or World War Z, it's an American book. World War Z, there's a movie with Brad Pitt, which sucks. It's a fiction book made up of interviews of people who survived the zombie apocalypse, nice. The fictitious one. And the audiobook is so great because it's every chapter is read by a different actor. So the voice acting is phenomenal, and it's like, you know, it's nonfiction in a fictitious world, in a fictitious scenario. And it's the creepiest thing about it is how many parallels there are to the coronavirus.
Oh, right. I bet that one you don't fall asleep to that easily. All right, one other question. Maybe you covered it already, but I'm going to put it back at you anyways, which is you're in Berlin, a lot of great music here. I mean, it sounds like you like some podcasts as well. When you put the headphones on and tune out the world, what are you listening to?
I really enjoy Vox Explained, Today Explained. I do like to listen to different worldviews. Like, I'm not going to listen to Russia Today or anything, but like I listen to that a lot, which is quite a liberal in the American sense of the word podcast. But then I also like to listen to exchanges at Goldman Sachs, which is, of course, you know, like turbo capitalism finance. Really enjoy these two. I listen to the CoinDesk podcast, selectively, of course, but I find that space very interesting. I'm not invested in crypto or not a lot, but I find it very interesting. Still asking myself what the use case actually is, but
we haven't found it yet.
We haven't found it yet, but you know, we're early but not wrong.
Yeah, blockchain great, DeFi TBD.
I love the Duolingo podcast actually. So this is the less serious. It's always about like Spanish, like trying to learn Spanish, not very well, but I'm trying. I really like the podcast. I really like, you know, languages in general. Like, so they have a new podcast that just came out yesterday about how language shapes our world. So like more of a linguistics podcast. Love it. It's one of my favorite topics as well.
That isn't it. You know, I was reading this article not so long ago about, you know, bilingualism and trilingualism and how the neuronal pathways for children to learn multiple languages align with the same neural pathways to learn mathematics and science. Yeah. So people that are, you know, bilingual from a young age have a greater propensity to move into science and math. Thank you to my parents for being that disciplined and giving me the gift of languages. So that stuck with me. I love the whole field of linguistics, and I hope to learn Spanish more fluent, better, and finding the time. My girlfriend's Serbian, so that's probably going to be the next one. Nice. Wow. I don't know how your brain does that many.
I haven't started yet.
I barely keep up with two, and I don't know if I do either one of them that great. So.
You've been fine.
Man, I guess I should probably give out a shout out to one other podcast that our mutual friend that brought us together to do this, Oliver Aust, who's been a guest on mine. You've been a guest on his. I've been a guest on his a couple times. So his Speak Like a CEO podcast. We try to share interesting conversations. And when he's like, I got a guy from WHU you really need to talk to. So thanks, Oliver. You were bang on with this one.
Thanks a lot, Oliver.
Yeah, man. Great. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. I always tell people I can't think of anything more flowy than to just spend an hour with a smart person just talking shop and talking life. And bro, we've made it to an hour and a half.
Oh shit!
So well done.
To anybody listening, sorry about the.
Oh, I am largely to blame because I didn't want it to end. But Daniel, man, thanks again. It was great. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to continue these conversations.
Absolutely.
And best of luck on the next phase of the refounder journey.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, shout out. Where can people find you that are interested in learning more about what you do?
So on LinkedIn, of course, visit our website, Wundertax.de, also in English, of course. And yeah, please reach out if you have any questions. I'm open to any mentoring. I love to give advice on certain topics. So I'm also going to I have a few mentoring engagements now. So please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn is best. If you have any questions, happy to help in the WHU Alumni Network.
Watch what you ask for, bro. The avalanche might be coming after your words of wisdom. Yeah, thanks again, man. It was great having you.
Thanks.
Well, folks, that was Daniel Hanemann, founder and CEO of Wundertax. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes coming to you every 2 weeks. And as usual, if you enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a like, follow, or 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast streaming service. If you didn't like it, just skip that part. Bis nächstes Mal.